Why was no one listening to the woman who knew the armory better than anyone alive? Carol Mitchell stood at the edge of the briefing room, her hands still smelling faintly of oil and solvent, her coveralls marked with the same stitched name she'd worn for 5 quiet years. Around her, chairs scraped, boots shifted, and laughter flickered in low, careless bursts. The room was full of people trained to notice danger, and yet not one of them noticed her. Until she spoke. "My son wouldn't run." The words landed wrong, not loud, not angry, just steady. Too steady for a grieving mother, they thought. Major Stevens didn't even look up at first. He shuffled papers, cleared his throat, announced timelines and classifications as if reciting weather reports. AWOL, sealed file, closed matter, the language of convenience, the language of endings. Carol felt something tighten in her chest, not fear, not yet, but recognition. This was how stories were buried, not with explosions, with paperwork. She took a step forward, a single step. "He called me," she said. "Less than 2 hours before he vanished. He said something was wrong." That's when they laughed. A few soldiers exchanged glances. Someone muttered her nickname under their breath. Aunt Ammo, the woman who cleaned rifles like they were heirlooms, the woman who took too long, asked too many questions, didn't know her place. Stevens finally looked at her then. His eyes were flat, calculating, the kind of eyes that didn't like complications. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, voice dipped in false patience, "your son violated protocol. This matter is no longer open for discussion." The room shifted, chairs moved, conversations restarted, it was over. Except it was. Carol nodded once, a small motion, economical, and as she turned away, Lieutenant Cole noticed something that bothered him more than it should have. The way she moved, the way her weight stayed balanced, the way her eyes swept exits without seeming to. That wasn't grief. That was control. And somewhere beneath Fort Wallace, something ancient and patient stirred, as if it had been waiting for her to notice. What kind of mother memorizes camera angles before she cries? Carol walked the base the way she always did, unseen. She passed soldiers who didn't look twice, vehicles that slowed just enough to pretend they weren't watching her. She felt the surveillance settle in behind her like a familiar pressure. Good, she thought, let them watch. Her heart ached, but not in the way people expected. This wasn't helplessness. This was the pain of restraint, of knowing exactly what you could do and choosing not to. At Charlie Depot, the gate guard wouldn't meet her eyes. He spoke softly, shared more than he should have. Blood on the floor, no missing ammo, no signs of escape. None of it fit. Carol listened, filed it away. Her mind moved in patterns older than this base, older than the name she wore. Marcus hadn't run. He interrupted something. And someone wanted her to believe otherwise. When she noticed the second vehicle, then the third, she didn't change pace. She stopped to talk, to check schedules, to be exactly what they expected her to be. Inside, something colder was forming. That night in her apartment, she opened the compartment she'd promised herself she'd never touch again. Codes, equipment, a voice from a past she'd buried. Ghost Mark authenticated. The name hit her harder than the confirmation. Someone had accessed her file, someone new. And they hadn't taken Marcus because he'd seen too much. They'd taken him because she hadn't. Why would a cleaner walk into a restricted depot at 2 in the morning? The tunnels were narrow, airless, silent except for her breath and the echo of memory. She moved through them without hesitation, hands knowing where the dark would dip, where the ceiling would lower, where the sound carried. In Building 7, the truth waited quietly. Boxes too light, numbers altered with care, the faint scent of chemicals that didn't belong. Marcus hadn't discovered theft. He'd uncovered a pipeline. When the footsteps came, she didn't panic. Panic was loud. Panic was wasteful. She slipped away as she always had, through margins, through design flaws, through places no one ever bothered to guard. Until a voice stopped her. "That's far enough, Mrs. Mitchell." Lieutenant Cole didn't raise his weapon all the way, not at her, not yet. She met his gaze, measured him, saw the question forming behind his eyes. "How far are you willing to go?" she asked him quietly, "to find out what really happened to my son?" Some questions, once asked, can't be unanswered. What happens when the mask slips and the truth looks back? The coin felt heavier than it should have. Cole didn't touch it at first. He just stared. The insignia, the name whispered in training halls and redacted reports. "Ghost Mark." She corrected him gently. "I was." They moved together after that, not as soldier and civilian, not as officer and suspect, but as two people who understood that duty sometimes meant disobedience. The bunker wasn't abandoned. It never is. Power hummed, voices echoed, plans layered over plans. And at the center of it all, Marcus. Bruised, bound, alive. Carol's chest broke open then, not loudly, not visibly, but something essential cracked as she saw her son's fear and the strength he was trying so hard to hold on to. She moved without rage, without excess, one guard down, restraints cut, a whispered promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Then Stephen stepped forward. Confident, armed, certain. Until Colonel Harrison spoke. The truth came out slowly, carefully, like something fragile that had survived a fire. She hadn't been hiding. She'd been placed. And the life she thought she'd chosen had been a mission, so deep even she had believed it. What do you become when the past finally remembers you? Operation Blackwater. The words unlocked everything. Training, loss, blood that never washed clean. A child she'd thought she'd given up forever, only to find she'd been allowed to raise him after all. Carol knelt in front of Marcus then, not as an operative, not as a legend. As his mother. "I'm still me," she said. "I've always been me." He believed her. That was the miracle. The arrests followed. The truth spread outward like a shockwave. Networks collapsed. Names fell. Silence reclaimed its place. But some things didn't go back to sleep. Why does strength sometimes choose to stay quiet? 6 months later, Carol stood in the armory again, teaching, correcting, caring for tools that protected lives she'd never meet. Someone asked her if the rumors were true. She smiled, kept cleaning. Outside, Marcus waited, alive, growing, choosing his own future. That night her phone buzzed. "One more mission." She didn't answer. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is come home. Why did it feel like the base itself was watching her now? Carol Mitchell sensed it before she could prove it. A pressure at the back of her neck, a wrongness in the rhythm of footsteps behind her. Fort Wallace had always been loud, engines, boots, shouted orders. But today the noise felt staged, like a curtain hiding something else. She walked anyway, slow, ordinary, a woman with a mop cart and a badge no one bothered to read. Inside her chest, anxiety tightened and loosened in waves. Not panic. Panic was useless. This was sharper, controlled. The kind of alertness she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. 5 years of telling herself that the past was over. 5 years of pretending her instincts were just habits left over from another life. Marcus ruined that illusion with one phone call. She replayed his voice again and again as she crossed the wide concrete path between maintenance buildings. He tried to sound calm. He always did. But she heard the hitch in his breath, the careful phrasing. He'd learned that from her, how to sound steady when you were. "Something off, Mom," he'd said. "Inventory doesn't line up. People are moving things they shouldn't be." And then silence. Her fingers curled unconsciously as she walked, nails pressing into her palms. Determination pushed against the anxiety, steadying it. Marcus didn't run. He didn't panic. He reported problems. He followed rules. If he disappeared, it was because he trusted the system to protect him. That trust might kill him. She reached the edge of Charlie Ammunition Depot and slowed, letting her eyes take in details no one thought to hide from her. Fresh repairs in the razor wire. A camera angled just slightly off its usual line. Tire tracks overlapping where they shouldn't. Someone had been careful. Sergeant Williams met her at the gate, his shoulders tight with discomfort. He spoke softly as if the air itself might be listening. Blood near the racks. No missing ammo. Car still in the lot. Every word confirmed what her instincts already knew. This wasn't desertion. This was containment. As she walked away from the depot, she felt it clearly now. The surveillance, not sloppy, not curious, purposeful, rotating vehicles, distance maintained with discipline. They weren't watching a grieving mother. They were watching a variable. Her breath slowed, her posture softened. She became smaller on purpose. She let her shoulders sag, her steps falter just enough to sell the illusion. Inside, her mind was moving fast. Whoever had Marcus knew procedure, knew access points, knew how to shut down cameras without triggering alarms. That kind of knowledge didn't belong to outsiders. And they were confident. That worried her more than anything. She changed direction twice, using reflective windows and parked vehicles to confirm what she already suspected. 2 teams minimum, possibly more, coordinated by radio. This wasn't base security improvising. This was a professional operation. For the first time since the briefing room, fear slipped through her control. Not fear for herself, for Marcus. If they were willing to deploy resources like this, then her son wasn't just a loose end. He was leverage. She forced herself to breathe, to think like a mother instead of what she used to be. If she revealed herself now, they'd tighten the net, move him, hurt him, kill him. No, not yet. The gymnasium buzzed with late afternoon activity. Sweat, laughter, the clatter of metal, normal life continuing while something rotten pulsed beneath it. She found Lieutenant Cole where she knew he'd be, watching recruits with an intensity that went beyond duty. He noticed details too. That was why she'd chosen him. She approached slowly, carefully shaping her expression into something tired and worried. She hated how natural it felt. "Lieutenant," she said, "I'm Marcus's mother." He recognized her instantly. She saw it in the way his spine straightened, in the way his eyes sharpened. Not hostility, curiosity. When he spoke quietly about the cameras, about the maintenance window that shouldn't have existed, her anxiety spiked again. But it came with grim relief. Someone else saw the cracks. "You're saying he wasn't alone," she said. Cole nodded, 3 others, uniformed, familiar with the layout. That hurt more than she expected. The idea that Marcus might have trusted one of them, that the betrayal could have been casual, routine. She thanked him, didn't ask for more than he could safely give. And when she walked away, she felt the surveillance tighten again, adjusting to her change in location. Good. Let them think she was confused. Let them think she was desperate. Her apartment welcomed her with silence, familiar, carefully curated. She locked the door, stood still, and listened. Nothing. Only then did she allow the exhaustion to hit. It rolled through her like a wave. 5 years of pretending, 1 day of truth pressing at the edges. She sat at the small kitchen table and let herself feel it. The fear she'd been holding back. The guilt that she hadn't warned Marcus. The ache of knowing that her past had reached out and wrapped itself around her son. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room. The apology didn't help. She moved automatically after that, opening compartments that had gathered dust, touching equipment she'd sworn she wouldn't need again. Each item brought a flicker of memory she refused to chase. Not yet. When the secure system came online, the name on the screen felt like a ghost staring back at her. Ghost Mark authenticated. Her jaw tightened. Someone had accessed her files, someone with authority, someone patient. The response came fast, too fast. Unauthorized access, 6 days ago. Her chest went cold. 6 days ago was before Marcus called her. This wasn't coincidence. This was design. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. For a moment, just one, she considered leaving, disappearing, vanishing the way she knew how. But the image of Marcus in that depot erased the thought. Determination replaced the fear, heavy and unyielding. She wouldn't run. When darkness fell, she waited, watched the watchers, learned their rhythm, their weaknesses. At 2:15 a.m. she moved. The tunnels welcomed her like an old secret, claustrophobic, dusty, honest. Down here, nothing pretended to be harmless. She crawled, climbed, navigated by memory and touch. Her muscles remembered what her mind tried to forget. This wasn't coming back to life. This was survival. Emerging near the depot, she paused, listening, timing her breath, measuring risk. Inside Building 7, the air smelled wrong. She cataloged everything without thinking. Weight, texture, residue, patterns that told stories no one wanted told. Marcus had been right. The operation was bigger than theft, bigger than Fort Wallace. And then the footsteps came. She didn't freeze from fear. She froze from calculation. 30 seconds, maybe less. She slipped out through an emergency override as flashlights cut through the dark behind her. Her heart pounded now, not from exertion, but from proximity. Too close. A voice stopped her. "That's far enough, Mrs. Mitchell." Lieutenant Cole stood in the shadows, weapon lowered but ready. His expression was conflicted, respect fighting suspicion. She met his eyes and felt something unexpected, hope. Not trust, not yet. But possibility. "How far are you willing to go," she asked softly, "to find the truth?" The question hung between them, heavy with consequence. Behind them, engines approached, protocols escalated. Somewhere, someone was tightening the net. And Carol Mitchell, cleaner, mother, ghost, knew there was no going back now. Because once the hunt begins, it doesn't stop until someone is found. What kind of truth makes grown men lock down an entire base? The first alarm didn't scream. It hummed, low, controlled, almost polite. Carol felt it through the concrete before she heard it through the air. Fort Wallace was shifting gears, quiet routines tightening into something sharper. Lieutenant Cole noticed it too. His jaw clenched. His eyes flicked toward the dark stretch of road beyond the depot. "That's not standard," he murmured. Carol already knew. The net wasn't just tightening now, it was closing. They moved together without agreeing to it. Not allies yet, not officially. Just two people who understood that standing still was the fastest way to lose everything. Cole led them through a service corridor, boots careful, radio silent. Carol followed, her heart beating harder with every step, not from fear of capture, but from the weight of what she was about to do. She was done pretending. Inside her chest, conflict churned. The mother wanted to scream Marcus's name, to tear through doors and demand answers. The part of her she'd buried knew better. Rage was loud. Rage made mistakes. And mistakes got people killed. They reached the edge of the utility tunnels, the air cooler here, older. Carol paused, her hand resting lightly on the concrete wall. For a moment, memories pressed against the inside of her skull. Other tunnels, other bases, other nights where the margin between success and death had been just as thin. She swallowed. "I know these tunnels," she said quietly. Cole studied her, really studied her this time. "You keep saying things like that." She didn't answer, she didn't need to. They descended. Underground, Fort Wallace shed its masks. No speeches, no ranks, just pipes, wires, and the quiet truth of infrastructure built for survival, not appearances. Carol moved with confidence now, her body remembering what her mind refused to name. They walked for nearly 40 minutes, crawled at times, waited when distant vibrations passed overhead, vehicles repositioning, boots marching in patterns meant to intimidate. Containment. "They're not looking for your son," Cole whispered at one point. "No," Carol replied, "they're waiting for me." Saying it out loud hurt more than she expected, not because she feared them, but because it meant Marcus had been taken knowing exactly what it would cost her. Guilt settled deep and heavy. This was the price of secrets, of choosing silence over truth. When they reached the Cold War bunker access point, the air changed again. Stale, metallic, touched by electricity that shouldn't have been there. Carol's anxiety sharpened into something focused and dangerous. Someone had reactivated this place. She crouched, pulling out the tablet she'd sworn she'd never power on again. The screen glowed softly, bathing her face in pale blue light. Encryption unfolded like a language she still spoke fluently. Heat signatures bloomed across the display. 6 guards, she murmured, minimum, and him. Cole exhaled slowly. "You're sure?" She nodded once. "I would be." They emerged into the bunker through a maintenance hatch, careful, controlled. The room beyond had been repurposed, old maps stripped from walls, new screens humming quietly. This wasn't a hideout. It was a command post. Carol's stomach twisted as she scanned the walls. Photographs, schedules, logistics flows, routes mapped with obsessive detail. At the center of it all, her face. Older photos, sharper eyes, a name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in years. Ghost Mark. "They built this for you," Cole whispered. "Yes," she said, "and Marcus was the bait." That realization broke something in her. Not loudly, not visibly, but a crack formed in the place where hope lived. She'd believed naively that this was about corruption, greed, money. This was personal. A voice echoed down the corridor then, her son's voice. Fear shot through her chest like a blade. They moved fast after that. The interrogation room was smaller than she expected. Marcus sat bound, bruised but breathing. Carol's vision blurred for half a second. She forced it clear. "Not yet." 3 men stood around him, professional, calm. This wasn't cruelty, it was procedure. "We know your mother will come," one of them said evenly. "She always does." Carol's jaw tightened. Pride and terror warred inside her. Marcus was holding himself together. That mattered. Cole whispered, "I can pull 2 of them away." "You'll have one chance," she replied. He nodded and slipped back into the shadows. The radio crackled moments later. A false report, clean, convincing. 2 guards left immediately. Carol moved. Her approach was silent, efficient, devastating. She didn't strike out of anger, she struck to neutralize. 1 man unconscious before he could turn. Restraints cut. Marcus freed. "Mom," he whispered, disbelief flooding his eyes. "I've got you," she said. "Stay close." Then a slow clap echoed through the bunker. Major Stevens stepped into the light. Smiling. "You always were predictable," he said, heart before logic. Carol positioned herself slightly in front of Marcus without thinking. The movement was instinctive, protective. "You used my son," she said. "Yes," Stevens replied calmly, "and you walked right into it." Before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Lower your weapon, Major." Colonel Harrison emerged from behind Stevens, his expression unreadable but his authority absolute. The shift was immediate. Stevens faltered. Truth spilled out then, not in a rush but like a confession long overdue. Deep cover, authorized silence, a mission so buried even she had forgotten it. Carol felt the floor tilt beneath her. She hadn't been hiding. She'd been placed. The name, the life, even her love for Marcus, real, yes, but engineered to put her exactly where she needed to be. Conflict tore through her, anger at the manipulation, relief that she hadn't failed, pain that her life had never fully been her own. And yet, when Marcus looked at her, scared and proud and confused all at once, she knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever they had planned, whatever she had been, this choice was hers. The alarms above them softened, the net loosened. The hunt was ending, but the reckoning was just beginning. Why did the truth feel heavier than the danger ever had? Carol barely heard the alarms fade. The bunker felt sealed off from time now, thick concrete, recycled air, history pressing in from every direction. Marcus stood beside her, free but shaking, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the mother he thought he knew. Colonel Harrison's words still echoed in her head. Deep cover, authorized silence, a life constructed so completely she had lived inside it without question. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt hollow. Stevens lay disarmed, guarded now by men who had turned their weapons away from him with visible hesitation. Power had shifted, but Carol knew better than to trust appearances. Operations like this didn't end cleanly. They unraveled slowly, taking pieces of everyone with them. Marcus broke the silence first. "They said you were dangerous," he said quietly, not accusing, just searching. "They said you'd come for me." Carol looked at her son, really looked at him. The bruise on his forehead, the exhaustion in his eyes, the courage it had taken for him to endure hours of pressure without breaking. "I was always going to come," she said, "no matter what they said about me." That part at least was simple. They were moved out of the interrogation room as containment teams secured the bunker. Evidence was catalogued. Screens were photographed. Names were recorded with grim efficiency. The conspiracy was real, bigger than Fort Wallace, bigger than Stevens. Carol watched it all with a distant calm, her thoughts turned inward. So much of her life had been shaped by choices she didn't remember making, assignments she didn't recall accepting, a sacrifice she hadn't known she agreed to. And yet, the love she felt for Marcus, no program could manufacture that. Colonel Harrison approached her as dawn threatened the horizon above ground. His tone was respectful now, careful. "You were never meant to remember," he said. "The memory suppression was to protect the mission, and you." "And my son?" Carol asked. Her voice didn't rise. That worried him more than anger would have. Harrison held her gaze. "You were given a life you were denied. We believed that giving you that truth, being a mother, would anchor you, make the cover unbreakable." Carol absorbed that slowly, not because she didn't understand, but because she needed to decide how she felt about it. "They used him," she said. "That was never part of protecting me." "No," Harrison admitted, "that was Stevens." Marcus stiffened at the name. Carol felt it immediately. She placed a hand on his arm, not as a shield, but as an anchor. "Listen to me," she said softly. "None of this is your fault. You did exactly what you were trained to do. You saw something wrong. You spoke up." Pride flickered across his face, fragile but real. As they were escorted topside, the base looked different. The same roads, the same buildings, but the illusion of order had cracked. Soldiers watched her now, not with mockery but uncertainty, some with respect, some with fear. She didn't meet their eyes. By mid-morning, federal vehicles lined the perimeter. Stevens and his collaborators were gone, escorted away under heavy guard. The machinery of justice had begun to turn. But for Carol, the hardest part was still coming. In a quiet office far from the Armory, Colonel Harrison laid out her options. He spoke carefully, choosing each word like it might detonate if mishandled. She could have her memories fully restored, return to active duty, reclaim the rank, the recognition, the unfinished missions waiting for her name. Or she could stay exactly where she was. Carol Mitchell, civilian cleaner, mother. Marcus listened without interrupting, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. When Harrison finished, silence filled the room. Carol felt the weight of both lives pressing against her ribs. The soldier in her understood duty, understood unfinished work, understood that walking away didn't erase responsibility. But the mother, the woman who had packed lunches, waited up late, worried about grades and phone calls, knew something else. She knew what it cost to always be ready to leave. "What happens if I say no?" Carol asked. Harrison didn't hesitate. "You live quietly with full protection, your service record sealed, honored but unseen." "And Marcus?" "He chooses his own path," Harrison said, "with the truth." Carol turned to her son. His eyes met hers without fear now, only trust. "I don't need you to be a legend," Marcus said. "I just need you to be here." Something in her chest finally broke free. Later, when the base returned to its routines and the world pretended nothing extraordinary had happened, Carol walked back into the armory. The smell of oil and metal felt grounding, honest. She picked up an M4 and began to clean it, her movements precise but gentle. Alina Rodriguez watched her from across the room, curiosity written plainly on her face. "They say you saved someone," she said. Carol didn't look up. People save themselves more often than they realize. That afternoon, Marcus met her outside for lunch like they always did. The sun was warm, the moment ordinary. And ordinary, she realized, was the victory. That night, when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, she didn't answer right away. She sat on the edge of her bed, thinking about tunnels and bunkers, about choices made in silence. Finally, she typed a reply. Not as Ghost Mark. As a mother who had already completed the most important mission of her life. Because strength doesn't always demand the battlefield. Sometimes it chooses to stay. What does a warrior do when the war finally lets her breathe? The first weeks after the bunker felt unreal, like living inside borrowed time. Fort Wallace returned to its routines with impressive speed. Flags rose, trucks rolled. Commands echoed across training fields as if nothing had cracked beneath the surface. But Carol noticed the differences. She always did. Doors opened faster for her now. Conversations paused when she entered a room. Some soldiers nodded with a respect they didn't try to hide. Others looked away, unsure of what they were allowed to know. She preferred the ones who looked away. Normality, she learned, was something you had to rebuild deliberately. It didn't return on its own. Marcus moved back into the small apartment with her, though neither of them said it out loud. At night, she heard him packing sometimes, the way she used to after missions she couldn't talk about. The roles had shifted, and both of them were learning the weight of the truth. One evening, as she cooked dinner, Marcus stood in the doorway watching her. "You don't move like before," he said finally. Carol paused, wooden spoon hovering above the pan. "How do you mean?" "Like you're listening all the time now, like you're not pretending anymore." She considered that. "Maybe I was pretending before," she said. "Pretending I didn't hear things, didn't notice." "Does it bother you?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, it's quieter when you stop lying to yourself." That night she lay awake staring at the ceiling, pride and unease tangled together. Marcus had seen behind the curtain now. He knew who she had been, who she could still be. And yet he hadn't pulled away. That mattered more than any commendation. Colonel Harrison checked in periodically, always respectful, always distant. The Army had a way of honoring boundaries when it suited them. Each visit came with reassurance, protection protocols in place, sealed records holding firm, the network dismantled beyond repair. But Carol knew better than to believe in permanent endings. She returned to work officially a month later. The armory smelled the same, cold metal, solvent, familiar comfort. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory settling her mind in a way nothing else could. She trained new civilian staff now, men and women transitioning out of service, people trying to find their footing in a quieter life. She saw herself in them more than she expected. One afternoon, Elena Rodriguez lingered after training, wiping down a rifle with careful precision. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Carol didn't look up. "You already did." Elena smiled nervously. "Why are you so thorough? I mean, most people rush this part." Carol set the weapon down gently. "Because this is the last hand that touches it before someone trusts it with their life." Elena nodded slowly, absorbing that. Later, as the armory emptied, Carol allowed herself a moment of reflection. This work mattered, quietly, invisibly, no headlines, no ceremonies. Just prevention. Just care. The kind of work that saved lives without ever taking credit. At home, Marcus threw himself into his studies with renewed focus. Logistics, supply chains, accountability systems. He'd always been drawn to the bones of operations, the unseen frameworks that kept things from collapsing. One night, over takeout containers spread across the kitchen table, he looked up at her. "They offered me an internship," he said. "State-level oversight division." Carol felt a flicker of fear she didn't expect, not because of danger, but because this was the moment parents reached when they had to let go. "That's impressive," she said evenly. "You okay with it?" he asked. She met his gaze. "I'm proud of you." And she meant it, even as something in her chest tightened. Letting him choose his path meant accepting that she couldn't shield him forever. She had to trust what she'd given him. Weeks passed, the base settled into a new normal, and then the message came. No number, no identifier, just words on a dark screen late one night. "Situation developing overseas. Hostages. Your expertise requested." Carol stared at it for a long time. The room was silent except for Marcus's quiet breathing down the hall. She imagined the faces she'd never see, the lives hanging in balances she understood all too well. The old reflex stirred: purpose, responsibility, the pull of unfinished work. She typed a response, deleted it, typed again. In the end, she stood, walked to Marcus's door, and listened for a moment longer. Then she returned to the kitchen table and made her decision. She didn't reject the call. She reframed it. Consultation only, remote, boundaries intact. When the reply came, brief, accepting, she felt neither triumph nor regret, just clarity. The next morning, Marcus noticed the change in her expression immediately. "You're thinking hard," he said. She smiled faintly, "just balancing things." "Work stuff?" he asked. "Life stuff," she replied. He didn't press. That too made her proud. As summer edged closer, Fort Wallace held a small ceremony. Quiet, restricted, no press. Carol stood at the back, hands folded, as names were read, some she recognized, some she didn't. The medals represented years of sacrifice that would never be fully explained. Her name was among them. She didn't miss it. Later, walking back toward the armory, Elena jogged to catch up with her. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, "I'm glad you're here." Carol stopped, surprised. "Why?" "Because you make this place feel like it matters," Elena said simply. Carol watched her walk away, emotion catching unexpectedly in her throat. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. That evening, she and Marcus sat on the apartment balcony, the sky streaked with orange and fading blue. The base lights flickered on one by one, orderly and predictable. "Do you ever miss it?" Marcus asked quietly. "The other life?" Carol thought about it, about adrenaline, purpose sharpened to a blade, about nights that blurred into survival. "I miss parts of it," she admitted, "but I don't miss who I had to leave behind to do it." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I think you chose right." She looked at him then, not as a soldier assessing outcomes, but as a mother watching her child become his own person. "Me too," she said. Her phone buzzed once more that night. Another update, another reminder that the world was still dangerous, still complicated. She silenced it. because some battles didn't need her anymore, and some victories weren't loud enough to notice unless you were looking for them. Carol Mitchell cleaned weapons, trained civilians, cooked dinner, gave advice, listened more than she spoke. And in the quiet spaces between duty and love, she learned something she'd never been taught in training. Strength doesn't disappear when the fighting stops. Sometimes it finally gets to rest. And sometimes that rest is earned. What remains when the world finally stops asking her to choose? The morning light came softly, the way it always had at Fort Wallace, unimpressive, steady, almost stubborn in its normalcy. Carol watched it spill across the armory floor as she unlocked the doors, the familiar click echoing like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. For the first time in a long while, nothing inside her braced for impact. She moved through her routine with practiced calm. Inventory logs, safety checks, the quiet ritual of cleaning steel that had passed through too many hands, carried too many intentions. Each rifle told a story if you listened closely. Some were careless, some were respectful, some carried the invisible weight of fear. Carol treated them all the same. That, she'd learned, was its own kind of justice. Alina arrived early, hair still damp from the morning shower, enthusiasm barely contained. She asked thoughtful questions now, not about rumors, not about the past, about why things were done a certain way, about responsibility, about what it meant to serve without being seen. Carol answered carefully, not as a legend, as a woman who had learned the cost of shortcuts. Outside, life moved on. Marcus's internship letter arrived in the mail that afternoon, official, embossed, heavy with promise. He read it twice, then looked up at her, eyes bright and uncertain. "I leave in 3 weeks," he said. Her chest tightened, pride rose, fear followed. Then acceptance settled between them, warm and solid. "I'll help you pack," she said. They spent the evening sorting through years of accumulated life. Old notebooks, uniform patches Marcus had collected as a kid, a half-coin taped inside a drawer neither of them remembered opening. Marcus held it up. "You ever think about what we could have been if things were different?" Carol considered that longer than he expected. "No," she said finally, "because this is what we are and it's enough." That night her phone buzzed again. No urgency this time, no coded language, just a request for advice, a question about risk assessment, about how to keep people alive when politics made things messy. She responded with 3 sentences, clear, unemotional, human. When she put the phone down, it stayed down. The day Marcus left, the base felt quieter than usual. Carol hugged him longer than she meant to. He hugged back just as tightly. "I know you worry," he said softly. "I always will," she replied. "That's not weakness, that's love." He smiled at that. Then he was gone, walking toward his future with the same calm resolve he'd inherited from her, whether by design or chance. Weeks passed. The armory became a place of learning, of patience, of second chances for people who needed something steady to hold onto after chaos. Carol watched them grow more confident, more careful, more aware of the weight of what they handled. Sometimes she caught her reflection in the glass, older, softer around the edges, still alert, still capable. Just no longer waiting for permission to be herself. One afternoon, Colonel Harrison visited one last time. No folders, no forms, just a handshake and a quiet nod. "You were right," he said. "Some missions end better when the operator walks away." Carol smiled politely. She didn't correct him. After he left, she locked up the armory and stepped outside. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the base. Soldiers passed her without comment, without mockery, without awe. Perfect. That evening she cooked dinner for one. The silence no longer felt heavy. She ate slowly, thoughtfully, then sat by the window as the sky darkened, the world continuing its imperfect rhythm. She thought about the girl she'd been, the soldier she'd become, the mother she'd chosen to be. None of them canceled the others out. They coexisted. Her phone buzzed one final time that night. Unknown number. She didn't rush to answer. Instead, she looked at the Armory badge on the table, at the half coin resting beside it, at the ordinary life she'd built out of extraordinary fragments. Then she typed a response, not as ghost mark, not as a weapon. As a woman who understood limits. I can't go where I used to go. But I can help you think differently. The reply came almost immediately. Understood. She turned the phone face down. Outside, the base lights glowed steadily, each one doing its small part. No spotlight, no applause. Carol Mitchell stood, stretched and prepared for bed. Tomorrow she would teach, correct mistakes, drink coffee that was too bitter, listen more than she spoke. And that would be enough. Because she had learned something no training manual ever taught. That strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it cleans weapons. Sometimes it lets go. And sometimes, when the noise fades, the missions end, and the world stops demanding proof. Dignity doesn't explain itself. It simply lives.